Rev it up and welcome to Cars Yeah, show number 2222. That's a lot of twos. Today, I'm in a very cool place in the UK. This is the Disneyland for petrolheads. Be prepared to be inspired.
This is Cars Yeah, where you'll enjoy interviews with inspiring automotive enthusiasts. Mark Green is here to provide you with a fuel injection of automotive inspiration. So get in, sit down, buckle up, and get ready for a wild ride here on Cars Yeah.
Hello, inspiring automotive enthusiasts, and welcome to Cars Yeah. Today I'm near Oxford in the United Kingdom in a beautiful place. I like to refer to it as the Disneyland for petrolheads with a very special guest by the name of Philip White. Philip, welcome to Cars Yeah. Do you have any gear? And are you ready to release the clutch?
Absolutely, Mark. Thank you for having me.
Well, absolutely. And talk about a guy who knows how to release a clutch. Oh my gosh. You sent me some very cool photos of you in some very cool cars. You're having some fun, and we're going to talk all about what you're doing there in Bicester. But first, what's one little thing that most people don't know about you, Philip?
It's a good question. I'm a pretty open person, so I think everybody knows quite a lot about me. But what they might not know is I actually studied art and architectural history with a view to becoming a conservation architect when I was younger. And thankfully, I found cars along the way and started on a slippery slope into the historic motoring world. And I haven't looked back since.
Well, no, you have not. My father was an architect, so I grew up around that world. He was also a very prolific artist and sculptor and painter and drawer, so our house was always filled with a lot of those things. But he had me convinced that he had X-ray vision because we would sit in a room and he could say, "Do you know what's inside that wall?" And he would sketch it. And I would go, "Wow, Dad, how can you do that?" So, yeah, interesting side note. Well, let me give you a proper introduction because what you have created with your team is absolutely spectacular. Philip White is the Associate Director, Marketing and Business Development Manager at Bicester Heritage and has been instrumental in their growth from its very early days. Since joining the founding team in 2014, Philip has assisted in the curation of the atmospheric business campus. And boy, is this place special. Now held as the de-facto home of historic motoring. From commercial letting to events, brand marketing, and communications, he has worn many hats as part of a dynamic team to create the now well-established destination for British petrolheads. And as part of the Bicester Motion umbrella company, Philip and the team are well on their way to building the UK's pre-eminent destination for motion technology, both past, present, and the future. Motoring runs in his blood, and outside of work, he's an avid driver of classic, vintage, and veteran cars, regularly competing in the London to Brighton Veteran Car Run. That sounds like fun. And endurance rallies. We'll be back in just a moment, but first a word from our sponsors. They keep the petrol in the tanks on this side of the pond, so give them a little love, and we'll be right back. Covercraft offers you 10 different options. That's right, 10 for your special vehicle's protections. You can choose from Weather Shield HP, HD, Sunbrella, UltraTech, Reflect, Form Fit, Custom View Shield, and their newest 5-layer all-climate, 3-layer moderate climate, and 5-layer indoor options. All are custom tailored by Covercraft's talented craftspeople just for you. It's the form and fit with the quality and attention to detail that's been their standard since 1965. Surface protection is the best way to preserve the investment you've made in your vehicles. Covercraft protects cars, trucks, motorcycles, RVs, trailers, and watercraft too. I have a Covercraft cover for every one of my vehicles, and I have a deal for you. If you use the code YEAH21 at covercraft.com, you'll get 10% off your Covercraft order. That's right, 10% off. Just use the code YEAH21 at checkout. Covercraft, protecting the things that move you. Most people don't think about their collector car insurance until their annual premium becomes due. Well, why wait and see if there are better options for your beloved rides? I didn't. Did you know if you change carriers before your policy runs out, your insurance company has to refund you the unearned portion of your policy premium? I did my homework, I shopped around, and I found American Collectors Insurance. They've been protecting collector vehicles since 1976. I encourage you to call my friends at American Collectors Insurance. Ask them about their agreed value policy. And if your collector vehicle is on your regular auto policy, you will be shocked at the savings, not to mention the assurance, should something bad happen to your ride, that you'll get what your vehicle is actually worth. Give them a call today for a quote at 866-ACI-YEAH. That's 866-224-9324. Tell them you're a friend of Mark Green at Cars Yeah! American Collectors Insurance. Classic car insurance designed by collectors for collectors. Automotive enthusiasts just like you and me. That's American Collectors Insurance. Give them a call today. Auto Geeks Blackfire SiO2 Spray Sealant. It's a spray-on, wipe-off sealant that's quick, safe, and easy to clean and protect your vehicles. I love using it on all my cars. Auto Geeks Blackfire SiO2 Spray Sealant is a spray-on, wipe-away sealant that uses SiO2 ingredients to provide a slick, brilliant, and long-lasting shine. Silicon dioxide is known to be one of the most effective ingredients in car care products, and Blackfire Spray Sealant takes advantage of every stunning feature it has to offer. This sealant will protect your paint from road film, dirt, and other common contaminants while providing an impeccable, long-lasting, hydrophobic surface that forces water to sheet and bead on your paint for months. Go to autogeek.net to get yours and for the best product selections on the internet today, along with their skilled technical support. Autogeek.net is where I go for all my detailing needs. That's autogeek.net. Check them out today. So, Philip, my goodness, I've got to get over there and see what you are creating, because as I look at your website, I just want to be there. But first, before you talk about what you're doing there at Bicester Heritage, how did you get to this point in your life?
Well, firstly, Mark, you'd be very welcome to come and see us, as would any of your listeners. It's an incredible place. And as you say, we'll get there in a moment. But I ended up here by bumping into my CEO, who's also my now brother-in-law, at a Cars and Coffee morning in London. And I turned up in an Austin 7, which looks like a toy car, really. And it was small enough to drive down the pavements in London if you wanted to avoid traffic lights and getting stuck at junctions. And I met Dan at this Cars and Coffee morning, and we got chatting, and he'd just got the keys to Bicester Heritage back in 2013, and we met and got on, and sooner or later he thought, well, I should offer this guy a job, and we haven't really looked back. Here we are, almost 10 years later. We're celebrating our 10-year anniversary at Bicester Heritage, and we've achieved a lot in that time.
This is an incredible story, because you think about what I have learned after interviewing so many people. Cars are the glue that binds people together. It's really a catalyst that brings people together and bonds people. And the fact that this chance meeting not only led to him being your brother-in-law, careful where you take your sister, right? But it also led to what you have built, and the fact that you've built this. Let's share with the listeners what exactly Bicester Heritage is. And I encourage listeners to go to their website. I'll put a link on Philip's show notes page. But once you get to the website, you're going to go, I've got to jump on a plane and go check this out, because I'm not so sure any place like this exists anywhere else in the world. Can you start with talking about the setting?
Yeah, absolutely. So you're right. It doesn't exist anywhere else in the world. We started 10 years ago. We started the first business campus for classic car specialist businesses. And it's, you described it earlier as Disneyland. And it really is an exceptionally beautiful place. We bought from the Ministry of Defence in the UK a pre-Second World War RAF, Royal Air Force bomber station, and it had been left to fall to pieces for the best part of 40 years. The Royal Air Force moved out in the mid-70s, and this incredible site, which had been untouched since the end of the war, was left kind of in its juice, sat there with the buildings boarded up and the trees, completely overgrown, and the gates chained shut. And we got the keys in 2013 with this plan to create this business campus to support the historic motoring industry in the UK, which has grown enormously over the last 10 years. And so we set about restoring the buildings and curating this beautiful community of like-minded specialist businesses that feed off each other. They work collectively. We run events to bring people through the gates to see this place. And as a collective, it works like an automotive marina. And it's a really useful, I suppose, phrase that. Everybody understands how a marina operates on the coast with boats, but it doesn't exist for cars. And so we started this inland automotive marina, and we have a little test track for people to use their cars. We have a storage company. We have 50 businesses based here, all of whom specialize in some form in motoring excellence. So from creating exhausts through to pre-race preparation to sales, upholstery, you name it, you can find it here on site. And we've had a huge amount of fun unpicking the history of the sites, restoring the buildings, finding out what they were used for, unlocking the social history, the wartime history, its development since then, and breathing life back into something which is absolutely unique in the UK. There is no other base that survives in its entirety like this one.
Wow. Yeah, a dream come true. So basically, you approach this as a commercial entity, like a real estate commercial project, but a big campus. But the fact that it's on such a historic setting adds this ambiance from my visual cues of looking at your website that really ties in nicely to the classic cars, correct?
Absolutely. So you'll often find that we have a huge number of pre-war cars here, sort of 1920s, 1930s and 1940s cars, and they absolutely fit with the site. And there are days when it looks like a film set, and these cars are positioned around the place and people are working on them. And it's just, you have to blink twice because it's like looking into the past. And we've grown with our businesses here. So a lot of companies have grown into bigger buildings, they've taken on new projects, and with that come more and more and more interesting cars and more interesting people. So as a community, we've grown fantastically over the last 10 years. And alongside that commercial element that you've so correctly described, we've had a lot of fun actually with film companies and production companies. So there's a couple of kind of the bigger sort of Hollywood style films that you might have come across that have been filmed here, like The Darkest Hour and The Imitation Game. The Imitation Game on code breaking, Darkest Hour on Churchill's time during the Battle of Britain and so on. So there's some really cool films that have been filmed here in amongst our buildings because they just, they are the real deal.
So looking ahead to the future, I know you have grand plans. My hat's off to you that for 10 years you've made this work because this couldn't have been a super easy endeavor. There's so many, it sounds wonderful, it sounds easy, but as I referenced Disneyland, that was not easy to build. What are you looking at, let's say, into the future? Because I know you guys have some grand plans.
We do indeed. I think it's worth looking at, I suppose, where we started with Bicester Heritage, the historic motoring industry in the UK. When we got going here, the industry was worth about 3.4 billion to the UK's economy, and it was growing. And the interest in historic motoring events was growing. So we have some amazing motoring events in the UK, like Goodwood Revival and Goodwood Festival of Speed and Silverstone. And these events were growing and appealing to a much wider audience outside of the kind of the close-knit motoring crowd, which is a really good thing. So new blood wanted to come into this historic motoring sector and get into old cars and enjoy them and have fun at these events. But with that, you need to make sure that you're capturing the skills and transferring those skills to new generations so that people's cars can be looked after and maintained for the future. So a key part of Bicester Heritage was to bring together this collective of businesses and ensure that they share their expertise to a younger generation by creating apprenticeships and creating a kind of an automotive safety net for modern classic car or historic car owners. And we worked very hard to achieve that over the last decade. And we have this amazing apprenticeship scheme now based at Bicester. Their apprentices come from all over the country. They work with businesses all over the country. And they've had hundreds of pupils through, which is a fantastic thing to see. But as we look to the future, we feel that we're at an inflection point in the motoring world where there has never been so much change since the dawn of the car as there is now. So we have new technologies coming through, whether that's electric powertrains, whether it's hydrogen. We have to stop using fossil fuels, and deadlines have been set for us to do so. So there's a huge shift going on where people have to embrace new technology, talk about cars in a different way, talk about charging, talk about your kilowatts, rather than miles per gallon. And for those that aren't avid car fans or petrol heads, it's a whole new language, and it's enough to make you go cross-eyed. So we came up with a plan for the future, and this is where Bicester Motion comes in as our umbrella brand, to create a destination where people can go and experience all forms of motion technology in a safe environment, learning about something new. So Bicester Heritage becomes a component part of a much larger site. We have our bomber station is 450 acres in size. It's huge. And we have a big grass airfield, 200 acres of grass airfield, and a lot of land outside of the historic buildings here to work with. And so we've come up with a master plan to create this destination where we can bring in the past, present, and future of automotive technology and position new tech businesses developing these new powertrains and new brands and position them next to the brands and the technology that we already understand. With that, some test tracks, and we'll retain aviation, some flying here, and create a new site of experience so that people can really get under the skin of what it means to understand automotive technology now.
Wow, very forward thinking, because whether you like it or not, EVs are here and they're coming on strong. Do you see that the use of our classic vehicles will become somewhat similar to the horse? If you think about when cars came about, a lot of people thought, these smelly, stinky things, they don't go very fast, are never going to last. Of course, that changed. And horses really never went away. In fact, I read a statistic that there's more horses in the United States now than there were when the car came about, because they became more items of pleasure, I guess, if you will, for riding in different events. Probably the same in the UK. Do you see that there will still be an avenue for people to drive petrol vehicles? And will it be limited to maybe places like yours, do you think, in the future?
It's a really good comparison, the change from horses to cars and where we stand now. And you're right. I mean, there are probably more horses around than there were at the dawn of motoring, and people really do use them for pleasure. And if you want to go riding now, you go to you go to a cross-country course, or you go to an event, or you don't commute on your horse anymore. And I think I don't want it to become a morbid topic, but I think you're right. I think in the future, if you want to drive historic vehicles, it may be that you have to go to a place that specializes in them. I hope that's not the case. And I think with the dawn of new technologies and the invention of synthetic fuels, for example, I hope that we can continue to drive historic cars in a way that's safe and responsible, and better for the environment. And it's a bit like reusing historic buildings. The buildings here have existed since the 1920s, and by restoring them, we're continuing to use something which has already created its carbon. And the same goes for historic motoring. There's nothing more green than a car that's already in use. And with historic cars, they've paid off their carbon footprint many times over. So it's better to make use of older technology, I suppose, but with modern fuels in a responsible fashion.
Absolutely. We'll take a short break and thank our sponsors. We come back, we'll talk a little more about what you're doing there. So sit tight, keep the seatbelts on. This is a magical journey. We'll be right back. If your car started today, well, thank a tech. If that truck delivering your goods today got to your home or your business, thank a tech. If that airplane you rode in took off and landed safely, and if that boat you're riding in arrived at the dock safe and sound, that's right, thank a tech. One thing the pandemic has taught us is that great techs keep America rolling. They are essential workers and we need them. Support career and technical education by getting involved with TechForce Foundation. It's a Cars Yeah charity of choice. Learn more at techforce.org today. You've heard me talk about Linkage Magazine here on Cars Yeah for a couple of years now. Well, they're growing. And in 2023, they're going to grow from 4 issues a year to 6. And there's an opportunity here for you to take advantage of this growth. If you go to linkagemag.com and click on the Renew button, if you already subscribe, you can get a great deal. Use the code RENEW6 for 1 year, and you'll get 6 issues for the price of 4, or type in Renew 12 for 2 years, where you also have a great savings. Plus, they'll even throw in a free Linkage hat. How cool is that? The publisher of Linkage is Donald Osborne. He's been a guest multiple times here on Cars Yeah. He's become a good friend of mine, and I'll tell you, Linkage Magazine is one of those newer magazines that you're going to want to get. It's all about experiences, opinions, and values. It's a wonderful publication, something I look forward to getting. And now that I'm going to be getting 6 a year, even more special. So go to linkagemag.com. Again, use the code Renew6 or Renew12 to get that special deal. Do it before December 31st, 2022, so that in 2023, you'll get 6 issues of Linkage Magazine instead of 4. So, Philip, I like to talk about challenges because they teach us very valuable lessons. They're not much fun to go through, but they teach us things that are sometimes invaluable so we don't encounter those same challenges again. In developing what you've done at Bicester, which is still almost impossible feat when I sit back and think about the challenges that you were faced with, is there one that really stands out for you that, looking back now, you can kind of say, I'm glad we went through that, taught us some great lessons?
Yeah, actually, I think I might go back pre-Bicester. Before I moved here, I worked for a company that developed actually electric powertrains, and they had some fantastic engineers. They had a really good product, but they were stuck in a sort of a Groundhog Day of corporate inertia, which was so frustrating. And they couldn't get out of their own way. And they had really good people working for them, and huge opportunities came their way. But they just tripped over themselves in trying to make them happen. And for me, it was 2 years, 2.5 years of learning how not to run a business, which at the time was hugely frustrating. And every day was a bit of oh no, what's going to happen next? But actually, having stepped out of that and moved to Bicester, and now looking back at that time, it was hugely useful learning how not to run a business and learning from other people's mistakes.
Oh, brilliant. I love it. Sometimes we sit in situations, it's kind of like the imagery of digging a hole and not knowing when to stop digging and get out before you're so deep in the hole that you can't get out. And I've been in similar situations where you're sitting there so frustrated. Sometimes you don't know what's going on, or sometimes it takes getting out of the hole, out of the situation, either looking back or while you're there, if you can do it, and saying, okay, this is a bad choice. In my situation, we hired some consultants to come in and look at what we were doing and give us this completely different image because the blinders were so tight that we hadn't taken them off to see wider. Is that a good analogy to the situation you were in?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. And I was so far down the rabbit hole, and I cared so much about what I was doing, that I was blinkered. And when I decided to leave, and I was offered to join the funding team at Bicester, I was offered a lot of money to stay. And I remember ringing up a friend and I said, I've got this problem. I've been offered this sum of money to stay in my job, but actually what I really want to go and do is go to this new job. But I know I'm taking a pay cut, and there's a crazy commute to get from home to Bicester. And he just said, never make a job decision based on the money.
You have a wise friend. I was in the exact same boat. And I tell you something, Philip, after interviewing so many people, I've learned many valuable lessons, but one of them has been, and it's pretty much what everybody says, but you need to do what you enjoy and surround yourself with what you enjoy, because money really, it's great to have. It's a great tool because it allows you to do many things, but many times it will not make you happy. Absolutely.
Yeah. You're right.
Anyway, it's more of a noose around your neck, right?
Absolutely that. And I think what it taught me was that you need to create your own environment. If you surround yourself with the right people and the right community, you will always be in the right position and you will love what you do.
Absolutely. Great friend you had there. Let's talk about a special vehicle. Now, you sent me some photos that have you don't know how to have fun, do you, my friend? You are sitting in some incredible vehicles. Looks like on some grand adventures. You're in a beautiful Austin Healey. Looks like 100, maybe even an LM. Am I close on that white, beautiful car you were sitting in?
You're correct. Yeah, that's a 104.
Yeah, some incredible things. And your headshot, which people will see on your show notes page, you got a very broad smile on your face. You are having fun. But I'd love for you to share one special vehicle out of your past that really stands out.
Well, the car I'm sat in that photo, which you've just mentioned, is an unbelievably special car to me. It's a car. It's a car from my past. It's the present too, and it'll definitely be the future. It's a 1903 Panhard Lavassa, and it was my great grandfather's first car.
Wow,
which is amazing. So we've owned it from new, and next year that'll be 120 years of ownership. And it's a very special car. And it's my great grandfather picked it up from Paris in 1903 and drove it back to his home in Bristol in the UK through all sorts of atrocious weather. He was stopped by the police for speeding, and eventually made it home. And in 1904, he put a racing body on the car and then never went racing. So he put the original body back on and painted it a dark green and black, and it's been untouched ever since. So the paint is 1904 paint. It's done with countless miles, and every year we enter the London to Brighton Veteran Car Run in it, which you mentioned earlier, and it's the world's longest running motorsport event, and it runs every November in the UK, regardless of rain, wind, sun. No matter what comes at you, you have to try and make this trip to Brighton, and you never know if you're going to make it. It's only 60 miles from London to Brighton. And you start in the dark in London on Hyde Park Corner. And for anyone listening, if you get the chance to go to Hyde Park Corner at the beginning of November and watch the Brighton Run start, it's a magical moment, because these cars, 300 veteran cars, the newest of which is 1905, that's the cut-off date. And they appear out of the darkness, and they have candles burning in their headlamps. Some of them are steam powered, so there's quite a few American white steamers you often see. Some are gas powered, some are fuel. There's a coal fired boiler in one of them, and so there's every form of kind of early motoring technology, including some electric cars. The first Porsche was a hybrid, and it's just a magical sight. And nobody knows if they're going to make it. It's an adventure. It's taken us. At our fastest, I think we've done it in about 5.5 hours. At our slowest, verging on 8 hours. Wow. Sometimes we've never made it. It's an incredible event, and so that car is a very special piece of our history. And my father is the second owner in 120 years.
My goodness.
I'll be the third, and my son, hopefully the fourth. And so it'll continue.
That is very special indeed. I've had several guests on the show that have participated in that. Yeah, it looks magical. The oldest car I've ever been in on a tour was a 1917 vehicle that ran in the Indy 500. The second year they had that race. And so I got a little flavor. Now that's kind of new for you guys, cutting off in 1905. But I got a little flavor for what it's like. And I tell you, while it was exhilarating, it was also horrifying and terrifying, because the guy that was driving it, and I was sitting there pumping the fuel, races that car, actually races it to this day. So he drives it very spirited, and where you're sitting, you feel like if we have an accident, I'm a goner, because you're very exposed. This car's no top, and but it was quite an adventure. I still makes me smile today. So I'm going to be your car psychologist here, Philip. I have a doctorate in car psychology, believe it or not. Well, you don't have to believe it because it's not true, but I do have some experience in this. If you were reincarnated, manifest as a vehicle, not what you want to be, but how you perceive yourself as a vehicle, this is going to be an interesting answer, I kind of think. What would you be and why?
Well, firstly, I like reincarnated. That's a good fun. It's a really tricky question, this, because you could come up with some really silly answers, couldn't you? I think my mind immediately went to being a Land Rover Defender, and I couldn't work out why. But there's something about it. It's a vehicle that will go anywhere. It'll do anything. And Defenders, they're very much a kind of a modern vintage car as well. So it's relatively reliable.
Yeah.
And I've been commuting in one for the last 7 years, so I love them through and through. iconic British cars.
Yes.
But for me, it's that kind of that ultimate practicality. It's go anywhere and do anything. And we've definitely had that spirit of adventure grand into our work ethic at Bicester here, and I've certainly picked up on that. And we've definitely got to where we are now by just getting on with it. Be a utility vehicle, take on that load, and try and cross that terrain to get to the other side. And you'll undoubtedly have fun in the process.
Nicely thought out. I think that works brilliantly. So, how about a great book that you'd like to share with our listeners?
It's a good question. So I thought of, there's a very obscure English book called A Bit Behind the Times by Kenneth Need. And I read it when I started at Bicester. And it's always stuck with me because it describes a real golden era of sort of post-war England where Kenneth and his friends were driving around the UK as young petrol heads. And they were in this incredible position where they could buy 1920s cars for next to nothing. And he bought a Grand Prix, 1920s Grand Prix Sunbeam, and raced it as his kind of weekend car. And they were buying Rolls-Royce Phantoms as tow cars. They were picking up pre-war Bentleys and using them as daily runners. And wow. It cost them nothing. And they were pretty much getting them from the scrapyard. And now these cars are, a 4.5 litre Bentley is £500,000, and they were running about in them, and if it ended up in a ditch, it didn't matter. You go and get another one. So it's an amazing book to read because it describes this obscure era of motoring history in the UK.
Wonderful.
Where these guys they cut their teeth on amazing cars.
A Bit Behind the Times. No one's recommended that book, so I always like to get a new book. I'll put a link to where you can probably get your hands on it. I'm guessing it's probably been out of print, but there's lots of great places to go to find old books. So that's a great one to add to your automotive library. I think I'm going to get my hands on one. So now this is I almost thought about eliminating this question for you, Philip, because you've been on so many ultimate drives, no doubt, the Brighton drive that you spoke about. However, I'll make this one a little different for you because I'm going to provide you with any vehicle in the world. Don't worry about the cost. I'll write the check. You can take anyone with you, even somebody from the past who's no longer with us, which opens up a world of opportunity of driving companions. So what does the ultimate drive look like for you?
Wow. Can I give you two answers?
Well, it's the holiday time, so I'll allow that. Sure.
Well, I've been a big Bentley fan my entire life, so having a drive with W.O. Bentley, the man behind them, would be pretty special.
Yeah.
And there's a particular Bentley which would absolutely be on my list. It's the one car that can do everything for me, and it's one of the supercharged 4.5 litres. And it used to belong in period to Wolf Bonato of the diamond mining family. And he commissioned this beautiful Gurney nutting bodied blown 4.5 litre, which is a two-seater with a kind of a hornet tail on the back of it. And it's still around. The registration is GK6661, I think, and it often appears at shows. It's owned actually by, I believe, an American collector. And it's a very special car. And there's one other version of it which has a fabric body called the Green Hornet. They're probably £5-6 million worth of car now, I should think. Maybe a bit more. But a drive in one of those with WO would be quite interesting, I think, because he would probably tell me how he hated the supercharged cars and how that was stepping away from his purest form of what a 4.5 litre should be.
Wow.
So I'd love to do that. That would be one answer to your question, but I'm going to be cheeky and give you a second one because this week, actually, a motoring story has come to light for me, which personally is quite special and I think would be my ultimate drive, particularly at the moment. So I own a Bristol 400, which is have you heard of Bristol cars?
Yes.
Have you come across them?
Oh yeah.
Brilliant. So they were a very small car manufacturer in the UK, and the company was founded by my grandfather post-war.
What? Really?
And yeah,
wow.
And so I've grown up in a motoring world surrounded by Bristol cars, but also by Bristol aircraft. And I bought a Bristol 400 about 18 months ago, which was the factory press car. So it appeared in lots of kind of the early photos and in the road tests in British car magazines like Autocar. And it was driven by the Shah of Iran on a test drive in Bristol in 1947. And it has a cool history.
Wow.
But I knew that it was used a lot by my grandfather, my mother's father, and my grandmother. And I thought there must be photos somewhere of them using the car. And this week I found an album of photos which documents their post-war drive from Bristol over to France and down to the Geneva Motor Show in 1949.
Oh my gosh.
And they continued their road trip back across France, the south of France, to the Pyrenees, between the mountains between France and Spain, and into the mountains, and then back up the west coast of France and flew back over the Channel. You could fly. There was an air service called Silver City Airways where you could put your car on a plane, and it was a 20-minute hop over the Channel back to the UK. And this album of photos has appeared this week, 2 days ago, and it documents their entire run, the pictures of the car going on and off the plane, appearing in French villages and in the mountains. And it's a really incredible piece for me of family history, but also social history. It's post-war Europe. They're testing this new car that they've built. It was very much underpinned by BMW technology, which they had purchased in war reparations, and there they were on this incredible adventure post-war. And so that would be, I think, now my drive. I feel like I have to recreate this in the same car and do it with my wife and my son, and off we'd go and try and recreate their route. So there you go. There's two drives for me.
Well, that's magnificent. Wow. Gives me goosebumps. That would be brilliant. Yeah, you definitely have to do that. And of course, that Bentley GK6661, I've seen that vehicle over here in the States. I believe it was both on the lawn at Pebble and it's been at the Quail during Car Week. It is quite a unique car, and the back of that car is just wonderful. If I've got my cars right, it's got the fenders that kind of spin up a little bit in the back. They kind of point to the sky along with that boat tail type torpedo back deal. So yeah, oh my goodness. Yeah. That would be, I just have to stop for a minute and think about what it would be like to take a ride in that vehicle. Oh my goodness. Well, Philip, you've taken us on an amazing ride today. I have got to get over there and visit your facility. Actually, I'm going to be in London on Christmas morning. However, it's just a short layover on our way to India. We're going to India over Christmas and the New Year's. So I'll have to wave from you from Heathrow because I don't think there's time for me to get out and get back through security. But I'll make a point to have another trip over there to come visit you. It would be brilliant. So before I let you go, could you share some parting words of wisdom or inspiration for our listeners today?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the things I've learned over the last few years here in particular is don't be afraid to make mistakes. As long as you can learn from them, don't be afraid to make mistakes. And the second piece of advice that I live by is that you get back what you put out. So if you're a good person and you're kind to people, it'll be returned to you. And I think that's crucial in life.
Absolutely.
Really, really important.
Absolutely. Well, you guys are doing that at Bicester Heritage is you're giving back history and you're providing jobs for people and fulfilling dreams. And it's exactly the way I envision Bicester Heritage. How can people learn more about this magnificent place?
All over social media. So look up Bicester Heritage, and our website is bicesterheritage.co.uk. We have several huge open day events a year. They're called scrambles, taken from scrambling to your plane to get your plane up into the air during the war. And we saw that as a call to action. So our scrambled open days are the most eclectic motoring events you'll attend. You will find Ferrari 250s parked next to Citroen 2CVs. You'll find incredible kind of wartime trucks parked next to modern 911s. You'll find everything in between.
Yeah.
And so we've designed them to be a really fun, laid-back, accessible open day event that celebrates everything we do at Bicester Heritage. You can get into the workshops here, you can meet the businesses and speak to people and bring your car and join the show. So come and see us. we're bringing back a big summer celebration next year in 2023 to celebrate our 10-year anniversary. There'll be plenty more about that online soon. But if you want to see a window into what we do have a look on Instagram and look at Bicester Heritage. And you'll see the amount of motoring activity that goes on here is extraordinary.
Cars Yeah listeners, you will be blown away. Bicester Heritage, Bicester Heritage. It is a magnificent place. I want to do a quick shout out and a thank you to my friends at Influence Mobility, both James and Luke, for bringing Philip to the show today. They brought me some wonderful guests, so thank you, gentlemen. Philip, thanks for being so generous today with your time and your expertise and sharing the magnificent life that you have created for yourself and for many others. Until you and I talk again, I'll see you down the road.
Thank you, Mark.
You're welcome. This was fantastic.
Thank you so much for joining us on today's ride here at Cars Yeah. Drive on over to carsyeah.com to find show notes and inspiring automotive fun. Download your free copy of Filler Up, a fun book filled with gorgeous photographs of fuel filler fun, including quotes from more inspiring automotive enthusiasts. Download your copy today, and we'll see you next time on Cars Yeah.